challengers to attend to?
Yes, we do, but first we would like to make introductions before the court.
Proceed.
My name is Taylor Moser, and along with my co-counsel Zachary McKeon
Good evening, Your Honor.
and Devin Larsdale,
Good evening, Your Honor.
we represent the state of Midlands today. I have a few documents to tender to the bench for Your Honor's reference throughout trial.
All right, what do those documents include?
These include the bill of particulars, the indictment, jury instructions, relevant case law, the pretrial orders, a copy of the Midlands Rules of Evidence, the special instructions, and the Midlands Penal Code, along with the stipulations.
And has opposing counsel seen these documents?
Yes, Your Honor, we have no objections.
All right.
May Mr.
My clerk of court.
Since we've never had the pleasure of appearing in Your Honor's courtroom, we would just like to ask your preferences when it comes to approaching opposing counsel, the bench, and the witness.
You only have to ask for permission to approach the bench or a witness.
Yes, Your Honor. If an objection is sustained, should we assume any relevant testimony is automatically stricken from the record, or should we move to strike?
Move to strike.
Yes, Your Honor. Do we have permission to move freely about the well during examinations and statements?
The well is yours.
And one last thing, we would like to invoke Rule 615, which is the constructive sequestration of all witnesses, barring party representatives.
Does any party have a party representative tonight?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense does. We have Ms. Chase Covington, who will be joining
Instructed to
us.
Kristen? Got it.
Yes, Your Honor.
The prosecution does not have a party representative.
And Ms. Covington will be appearing in court being unsequestered?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
With that, the prosecution is ready to proceed, Your Honor.
All right. Any pretrial matters from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, we'd like to make appearances before the court.
Proceed.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Morgan, along with my co-counsel, Richard Rosario,
Good evening, Your Honor.
and Peter Checkenberg.
Good evening, Your Honor.
Good evening.
We represent Ms. Chase Covington in today's case.
Good evening,
Just a question or two as to Your Honor's preferences. We would like to invoke Rule 603, assuming that all witnesses are pre-sworn.
They have been so sworn.
And with that, the defense is ready to proceed.
All right. Prosecution, you ready for opening statements?
May I proceed?
Then.
May it please the court, opposing counsel, members of the jury. Being gifted power is an honor. This honor is for those who can overcome the temptations of greed to serve their purpose honestly, effectively, and responsibly. This power was gifted to Chase Covington, one of the head of the chair of the Midlands Gambling Commission, the defendant in today's trial, and one corrupt commissioner. We're here today because on April 17, 2015, the defendant couldn't uphold to these responsibilities and her true colors were revealed. The colors of one corrupt commissioner. You see, in Midlands, the Gambling Commission regulates all activities of the casinos. And in fall of 2014, the Gambling Commission announced they'd be accepting proposals for a new casino. Now, being the swing vote of the Midlands Gambling Commission, the defendant knew how valuable she was. And she knew just how much this value was worth. $200,000. You see, being one of the three commissioners on the Gambling Commission wasn't enough for the defendant. She needed more. $200,000 more. This was the price at which the defendant sold her responsibilities as one of the commissioners and accepted a bribe. On October 1st, 2014, as soon as the bid for the new casino license was announced, the defendant received a call from Avery Bancroft, a casino owner in Midlands who owns the Black Bear Casino and has been known by more than one person as Notorious. Soon after receiving this phone call, the defendant had Avery Bancroft over for drinks and to discuss business, something the defendant never does. A discussion in Avery Bancroft stating he was happy to go the extra mile to receive this casino license, and the defendant winking in reply. Now, the prosecution's here to prove to you that this bribe did in fact take place, and we have to do that by proving three things. One, that the defendant is in fact a government employee. Two, that the defendant received something of value for an official act. And three, that the defendant acted with the intent to be influenced in this official act. Now, through today's case, you'll be hearing from a detective. Now, this detective is currently in an undercover investigation, so we can't refer to him by his true name, but we will refer to him by the name he used in his investigation, or in this specific investigation, Mickey Keenan. Detective Keenan worked undercover as an auditor for the Gambling Commission, which allowed him to sit in on closed meetings between the defendant and Avery Bancroft, where he witnessed discussions of a bribe. You'll also be hearing from one of the Black Bears bellhops, Devin Del Sesto. Devin Del Sesto witnessed firsthand interactions between Avery Bancroft and the defendant as well. He was also present in the VIP room, where he witnessed both the defendant and Avery Bancroft walk in with their briefcases, set their briefcases on the ground, played blackjack for about 15-20 minutes, and then watch the defendant leave with Avery Bancroft's briefcase. And finally, you'll be hearing from Tracy Menettos, the defendant's stepsister, who moved in with the defendant around the time this new casino license was announced. She'll explain her worry for her step-sibling as she came in contact with very puzzling evidence and was present during a private at-home meeting between the defendant and Avery Bancroft. Through today's case, the evidence will show that the defendant received something of value, that the defendant did receive a bribe, and that the defendant is, in fact, one corrupt commissioner. Members of the jury, we ask that you don't let our government be tainted by someone who can be influenced by a bribe, be tainted by someone who can make decisions for the entire community simply based off how much she receives in return. At the end of this trial, I co-counsel Ms. Moser will come before you and ask that you find the defendant guilty of bribery. Thank you.
Your Honor, we don't have them.
You waive your right to opening statement defense?
Yes.
All right. Prosecution, call your first.
Well, Your Honor, just for the purpose of closing, so we're going to Taylor Rosa to start planning for closing from now. We have like a 30-second opening.
Go for it.
Ms. Covington, she did things by the books. At the end of the trial, you see how the state was basing the case off of a Riddle Foundation. Find Ms. Covington not guilty.
Truly a test. Prosecution, you ready to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Mickey Keenan.
Officer Keenan, you've been previously sworn.
Yes, Your Honor.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Good evening. I'm currently working on an undercover case, so I cannot disclose my real name for safety reasons, but I can tell you that for purposes of today's trial, you can refer to me by my alias, Mickey Keenan.
I understand, Mr. Keenan. What do you do for a living?
Well, I work as a detective for the Special Investigation Division at the Midland State Police Department. I mainly focus on doing undercover work, infiltrating drug cartels and high organized crime operations.
Can you tell the jury about your educational background?
Certainly. Once again, I can't tell you where I did my personal schooling, but I can tell you that I attended the Midland State Police Academy, where I graduated valedictorian of my class.
Have you always been a detective?
No, ma'am. Actually, right after I graduated from the academy, I started off as a beat cop. And giving tickets to drunk college students got old pretty quickly, so I asked to be transferred. Given my particular ethnic and social political background, I was placed on the SID, and that's how I ended up doing undercover work.
Did you have an undercover assignment in the summer of 2013?
Yes, ma'am, I did. June 2013, I was tasked with investigating corruption with the Midlands Gambling Commission.
You mentioned corruption, but what kind of corruption specifically?
Well, I was tasked with looking into how the three members of the commission operated and reached their decisions, since the members of the commission are appointed by the governor.
When did you formally begin this assignment?
Well, the assignment started on July 1st, 2013. I started off in the Gambling Commission undercover, operating under the alias that I use now, Covington.
What was your role within the Midlands Gambling Commission?
Well, I was a staffer. I did some auditing, and mostly I was the assistant to one of the commissioners, Covington. My position allowed me to go with Ms. Covington anywhere she went to, attended different meetings and hearings, and had access to different proposals.
How did you proceed in your investigation once you started at the Midlands Gambling Commission?
Well, the way that I decided to approach the case was by determining how Ms. Covington would vote into this new casino license that was announced on October 1st, 2014, and more importantly, why.
Do you know who was competing for this casino bid?
Yes. The two main frontrunners were Shannon Stark and Avery Bancroft.
Who is Avery Bancroft?
Avery Bancroft is a casino owner here in Midlands. He owns the Blackbird Casino. In 2015, he showed interest in acquiring a second casino in something that had never been done in Midlands.
Are you aware of the defendant and Mr. Bancroft having any contact regarding this casino bid?
Yes, of course. Just by working the case, I witnessed many different interactions. The first one started on February 13th of this year, the day before Valentine's Day.
What happened on this day?
Well, I was going over my daily briefing with Ms. Covington, just going over what we were going to do that day, when the secretary was on a phone call from Avery Bancroft. This phone call was when I heard my first red flag, which was Mr. Bancroft saying, I heard about the new proposal we're putting together.
Let the witness finish before I object to your honor.
I heard about the new proposal. I'm putting together an application. We'll let you speak to you about it to grease the wheels.
Your honor, I object to hearsay the Mr. Bancroft's statements. Response?
Yes, Your Honor. According to Rule 801 D2E, this is a statement made by Ms. Covington's co-conspirator, so it is not hearsay in court today. Furthermore, if I can direct your attention to case law on page 5 at the top, State v. Owens. It states that the prosecution has until the end of trial today to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that a conspiracy took place.
Is that the defense's interpretation of State v. Owens?
Partially, Your Honor. The other half of State v. Owens, they have to lay foundation that this conspiracy was going to occur. We haven't heard any of that foundation laid.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. Furthermore, in State v. Owens, it says that these statements themselves can be part of the foundation that we lay to prove that a co-conspiracy was taking place.
Do you have any further response?
Yes, Your Honor. That at this time we only know that Mr. Bancroft is the owner of the Black Bear Casino and Ms. Covington works for the Midlands Gambling Commission. We don't know exactly why they're being in contact or what the parameters of Mr. Bancroft contacting Ms. Covington is. With some foundation, we can establish whether there was been a conspiracy or whether there was not.
Ms. Moser, what is your response to the defense's contention that we don't know that these statements are going to a conspiracy and therefore foundational for a conspiracy yet?
Your Honor, we heard Mr. Keenan just talk about how Avery Bancroft was competing for the casino bid that Ms. Covington had a vote on, and he wanted to become the only person in the state of Midlands to own 2 casinos. This is the beginning of the conspiracy, and why Mr. Bancroft wanted to contact Ms. Covington.
Ms. Moser, does the foundation have to be laid before the statements are admitted, or can they be constructively redacted at the end of trial if sufficient foundation is not laid?
That is my interpretation of State v. Owens, that we have until the end of trial today to prove that there was a conspiracy.
Do you disagree with that contention, defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, then for the time being, we will admit these statements. Please renew your objection at the end of this trial if you feel as though insufficient foundation has been laid.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Keenan, were you done with your answer, or would you like me to repeat the question?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. What happened on February 13th?
Well, as I said before, that's when I heard the first red flag in my investigation, which was Mr. Bancroft speaking to Ms. Covington and saying, I heard about the new casino license, I'm putting together a proposal and would like to speak to you about it to grease the wheels.
Had you previously known Mr. Avery Bancroft?
Yes. Just by doing basic work at the Gambling Commission, I had dealt with Mr. Bancroft. However, most of the time I went to his assistant, Corey Hyde.
Did you and Corey Hyde ever interact in regards to this new casino bid?
We did. We first met on March 2nd, and we had agreed to meet the day prior.
What happened at this meeting?
Well, it was at this meeting that I told Corey Hyde that we were interested in Mr. Bancroft possibly acquiring us at the casino, and I quickly shifted the conversation to Mr. Bancroft. However, Ms. Hyde was not was reluctant to speak about Mr. Bancroft, at which point I put my badge on the table, slid it across the table, and I told her that she'd be working for me as an informant in catching Mr. Bancroft, rather than Ms. Covington.
How did Ms. Hyde respond to this?
Well, Ms. Hyde was fully on board. She agreed to set up meetings between myself, herself, Ms. Covington, and Mr. Bancroft.
Did Ms. Hyde ever set up any meetings?
Yes, ma'am. 3 meetings were planned.
I'd like to go through them one by one, Mr. Keenan. When was the first meeting scheduled to take place?
The first meeting took place on March 31st of this year. I attended this meeting along with Corey Hyde and Mr. Bancroft. I also had a wire put on Ms. Hyde to make sure that everything in the conversation was recorded and we could look at the transcript afterwards.
Was any evidence uncovered at this meeting?
Yes, thankfully the entire conversation was recorded and the wire worked successfully. It was in this conversation where I found my second red flag, which was Mr. Bancroft saying, I'm not one of those Chicago or Jersey folks, but I know how to play the game, which would point to win them.
Objection, Your Honor, to substantially more prejudicial than probative. May I hear it?
Read statement first, please.
Mr. Bancroft said, I'm not one of those Chicago or Jersey folks, but I certainly know how to play the game.
Response?
Your Honor, this is substantially more probative than it is prejudicial because it goes to the bribe that took place, that Avery Bancroft was willing to participate in it, and it lays the foundation for Ms. Covington's involvement in this bribe.
Your response?
Yes, Your Honor. I realize that there is probative value in this statement, but specifically referring to I'm not one of those Chicago folks holds a high prejudicial value that outweighs the probative value because Chicago is a city that is notorious for crime and a specifically organized crime in which high stakes legal activity occurs. This reference would go to substantially prejudice the jury versus its probative value.
Sustained.
When was the second meeting scheduled to take place?
The second meeting took place on April 13th of this year. This time, I attended along with Corey Hyde, Mr. Bancroft, and Ms. Covington being present at this meeting.
Was Ms. Hyde able to wear a wire to this meeting as well?
No, ma'am. Unfortunately, Mr. Bancroft decided to increase security for this meeting. He had the head of security, Danny Boyd, had searched everyone prior to entering the meeting, and there was no way that he could have pulled up the wire then.
So if Corey Hyde couldn't wear a wire, how can you prove to us that this meeting actually took place?
Well, no wiring, no recording, so I had to find the second best option. I called up one of the Black Bear bellhops, Devin Losesta. I ordered room service, and once he got there, I had him confirm that the meeting took place, as well as who was at the meeting.
I'd like to back up to before Mr. Del Sesto arrived. Was there any talk of the casino bid?
Yes, at least initially. The business started off normally with a lot of business speak. Ms. Covington asked about money, at which point I handed Mr. Bancroft a napkin and a pen, and she wrote, yes, 150K, and slid it across the table to Ms. Covington.
How did Ms. Covington react?
Well, she picked up the napkin and said, I don't think you understand what kind of position this puts me in. Then I handed Mr. Bancroft a second napkin, a pen again. He wrote, yes, 150K, scratched it, and this time wrote yes, 250K, and once again submitted to the commission.
How did the defendant react this time?
Well, this time she didn't really say anything. This time she just grabbed the napkin, looked at it, put it inside her pocket.
I'd like to be very clear about this, Detective Keenan. Did Miss Covington leave after she picked up the napkin?
No, man, no. It was only after Devin Sesto walked in with a room order that she went wide-eyed and said, I thought this was a private meeting. Mr. Bancroft insisted that his employees need discretion, but Ms. Covington insisted on leaving.
Now I'd like to talk about the third and final meeting. When was this meeting scheduled to take place?
All right, so the third meeting was set for April 16th. However, this one didn't go quite as planned.
What do you mean it didn't go quite as planned?
Well, all of us were supposed to attend that meeting. All of us, I mean myself, Corey Hyde, Mr. Bancroft, and Ms. Covington. We all arrived on time except the commissioner. She actually didn't arrive at all.
What did you do when Miss Covington didn't show up?
Well, initially, I waited along with Corey Hyde and Mr. Bancroft. Eventually, 30 minutes went by or so. She still hadn't shown up. I went into the restroom to cool off because the situation became tense. By the time I came back from the bathroom, Mr. Bancroft was gone.
Did you ever see Mr. Bancroft again that day?
I did. When finally I wasn't there, I looked everywhere for him, and eventually I found him inside the VIP room at the Blackbird Casino. He was sitting at a blackjack table. I tried to ask him what had happened, why Ms. Covington may have not appeared. He just picked up a black briefcase and left.
Did you ever see the defendant that day?
No, I didn't personally see Ms. Covington that day.
Detective Keenan, when was the vote held that would decide who won in the casino bid?
The vote actually took place the day after, on April 17th, 2015. Two of the commissioners voted for Mr. Bancroft, Walton, and Covington, and they awarded him the win for the second casino.
Now, Detective Keenan, I'd like to talk to you about some of the police work you did in regards to today's case. Did you ever obtain any warrants?
Yes, I obtained warrants to search the video footage inside the Blackbird Casino VIP room that I spoke about earlier, as well as a warrant to search Mr. Bancroft and Ms. Covington's homes and their persons.
Hold on, somebody's trying to get in.
They got it.
Was any evidence uncovered when you looked at the video footage?
Not, unfortunately. The video footage shows the table which I found Mr. Bancroft. However, there's a blind spot over the table, so it just shows Ms. Covington and Mr. Bancroft going into the blind spot and leaving roughly 15 minutes after.
Was anything useful found when you searched either the defendant or Mr. Bancroft's home?
Yes, thankfully the search of their homes went a lot better. We found a bank statement on Ms. Covington's home for $200,000 on the date the vote took place. So naturally, based upon this, my investigation, several interviews conducted by my colleagues from Blackbird employees, we arrested Mr. Bancroft and Ms. Covington, and they were later charged with bribery.
Was any evidence found on either person when they were arrested?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Covington, she had a black briefcase on her possession at the moment of her arrest.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes. May I proceed?
You may. Oh, you don't stand right in front of the camera.
Yes, Your Honor.
Right there.
That's good.
Officer Keenan, you began working at the Midlands Gambling Commission in the summer of 2013.
Yes, sir. Formally on July 1st of that year.
And in June of 2013, you received an email from Chief Kimball, your boss.
Yes. Francis Kimball had just become the chief of police of the MSPD. He sent an encouraging email to the entire force.
If I were to show you a copy of this email, you would recognize it?
Certainly.
Showing opposing counsel. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Officer Keenan, you recognize what I've just handed you.
Yes, sir. This is the email we spoke about from Chief Kimball on June 18, 2013.
This email is in the same or substantially the same condition as the last time you saw it.
Yes, sir. It does not appear to be changed.
Your Honor, the defense moves into evidence what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 1 into evidence as Defense A.
Any objection?
And yes, Your Honor, objection hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, this document is being offered for the effect that it had on Officer Keenan specifically. Chief Kimball outlines the procedures for the new police, well, the way he will direct the police department when he took over in the summer of 2013, and how Officer Keenan pledged to follow these orders. And these orders are important because they show how Officer Keenan conducted his investigation into today's case.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. This document is over a page long, so not every statement on here can't be offered for the truth of the matter asserted. There are a couple statements in here specifically that are offered for the truth of the matter asserted and not their effect on Detective Keenan.
What statement specifically?
There's a couple that says Midlands is corrupt and everyone knows it. We're not focused on things that make front page news, and if it isn't newsworthy, it isn't worth your time.
Are those the only statements that you would contend cannot be offered for the effect on the listener in this situation, given the defense's argument?
One more is let's reel in the big fish.
Your response to those statements?
Your Honor, I would ask for a constructive redactment of all the statements except the last statement. Let's reel in the big fish is a command, and it goes to the effect that it had on Officer Keenan.
Your response?
It has not been established that either Ms. Covington or Mr. Bancroft are quote-unquote big fish. There is no definition of what a big fish is, so it cannot be an effect on Detective Keenan.
Well, I think he changed his argument to that as a command, not a statement. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. On those grounds, I'm going to overrule. We will constructively redact those few sentences other than the last one that you were concerned about.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, the document has been entered.
Yes, it has.
Officer Keenan, in this document, Detective Kimball instructs you to let's reel in the big fish.
Yes, he did. Again, he was very encouraging to us. We wanted to make an impact in the community, and if we go after the big fish, and we improve the community, and we were very glad to follow his orders.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Yes, sir.
May I publish the document to the jury?
You may. And redirect? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, Your Honor. Officer Keenan, after you received this order, you served as an auditor for the Midlands Gambling Commission.
Yes, under the Commissioner Chase Covington, my position gave me almost exclusive access to all the activities of the Commission.
And you were looking for illegal activity to occur?
Yes, sir, and that is why I started at the Midlands Gambling Commission, and also been tasked at the beginning of, the summer of 2013.
In October of 2014, you received the opportunity you were looking for when the Midlands Gambling Commission announced that it would be seeking proposals for a new scene.
Yes, sir, and thankfully on February 2015 was when I found my first red flag into the case, and all my hard work and time were rewarded.
In fact, Officer King, when you heard that the Midlands Gambling Commission would be accepting proposals, you hoped that Mr. Bancroft would give a proposal to the Midlands Gambling Commission.
Yes, sir. Bancroft is known by more than one person as being notorious. The entire community knows it a la Capone. So we were very excited, myself at least, that he would be applying for a casino license.
Your Honor, I would object to the reference to Al Capone as substantially more prejudicial than probative. Al Capone is a notorious criminal who is serving time in prison.
Your response?
Yes, Your Honor, this is not, this has more probative value because he was specifically saying how the people of Midlands view Mr. Bancroft and how it affected his investigation when he was moving forward.
One more response?
Your Honor, Officer Keenan can speak to Mr. Bancroft's reputation, what he's known as in the community. He said he's notorious. That is fair. But saying that he's Al Capone, who's a notorious member of organized crime, who's committed bribes and various other illegal crimes that I cannot think of at this moment, but that reference goes to substantially prejudice the jury because that is a well-known name that is associated with organized crime.
I'll allow the, we'll sustain the objection
Yes, Your Honor. Back to where we were, Officer Keenan. In October 2014, Mr. Bancroft called Ms. Covington to set up a meeting.
No, sir, that was done on October 1st.
Oh, excuse me. Mr. Bancroft did, in fact, contact Ms. Covington about a meeting about the proposal.
Yes, roughly 5 months after the application, the announcement for the application was announced, the first contact I witnessed was on February 13th.
On March 31st, 2015, you scheduled a meeting between Mr. Bancroft, Mr. Hyde, and yourself.
Yes, sir, we did.
And later that day, you spoke to Ms. Covington about what happened during that meeting.
Yes, I gave her just an overview of what had happened.
Specifically, when you were talking to Ms. Covington about what went on in that meeting, she said, "I do things by the books."
Yes, I had asked her if she'd be willing to take something off the books, and she first looked around in the room, and then said, "I do things by the book."
And Mrs. Covington also mentioned in this meeting, when you referred to doing something extra to get the proposal passed, that she would look at how Mr. Bancroft's proposal stacked up against the other proposals for casinos.
Yes, as well as telling me she was not likely to vote for Mr. Bancroft, but that she could be persuaded.
Yes, Officer Keenan, that persuasion was that Mr. Bancroft's proposal had to outweigh the factors of the other proposals.
I'm not sure. I'm not certain that's exactly what she meant. But she just said that she could be persuaded.
Is it your testimony here today that Ms. Covington did not say that she was going to look at how Mr. Bancroft's proposal stacked up against the other proposals?
No, counsel, I never said that. I specifically said that she did in fact say that they would be looking into how Mr. Bancroft's proposal stacked up like that of Shannon Starks.
No further questions, Your Honor.
And your redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. We just asked that Detective Keenan be allowed to sit down.
Detective Bailey, you are excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Prosecution, call your next witness.
Prosecution calls Devin Del Sesto.
Mr. Del Sesto, you are under oath.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Devin Del Sesto.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a bellhop at the Black Bear Casino.
What are some of the things you do as a bellhop?
Trust me, there's a list. I check guest luggage, I park their cars, deliver room service, deliver mail, take towels down to the pool. It's a long list, and it gets a little boring. But to pass the time, sometimes I play a game with myself and say, check that luggage. And if luggage seems to be nicer, I can think of what kind of tip I'll get. Probably bigger. It's Walmart guys, I probably won't be getting any tip at all. I've kind of become familiar with luggage over the years.
Who is your boss at the Black Bear Casino?
Well, Avery Bancroft is. I've worked for Mr. Bancroft for years, and I thought if he ever got a second casino that I might be put in management.
Can you elaborate on the second casino deal?
Well, the Gambling Commission of Midlands announced that they'd be accepting new proposals and such for casino licenses. I thought Mr. Bancroft might apply for one and get one.
Do you know who is in charge of the second casino deal?
Well, I know that the Gambling Commission announced it in Nolan from working at the Black Bear. I learned they also do accept the proposals and give out the licenses.
Now, I'd like to talk about the events on April 13th, 2015. Do you remember this day?
Yes, sir, I do.
Did you work on April 13th?
I did. I worked until I clocked out at around 3 p.m.
After your shift, did you go home?
Not necessarily. The kitchen got a delivery order for one of our private suites, room 312, so I volunteered to take it up. I thought I might get a tip.
What was this room service order?
It was just one of our regular cheese plates and a bottle of Romani Conti, you know, the kind of wine that rich people drink. So I took it upon myself to take it to the room upstairs, but I took the elevator. I don't really do stairs. And I walked up there, not the stairs, the elevator shaft, and I saw Danny Hoy, the head of security, standing in front of the door. So I figured I might have to check in with her before I got into the room.
What happened when you checked in with Danny Hoy?
Well, she made sure I was just delivering the room service and thought she was even going to take a bite out of the cheese plate and make sure the cheese wasn't poisoned. It was just American.
Now, have you ever seen any type of security like this before?
No, sir. I've never seen any security like this at all from all the years I've worked with the Black Bear.
Did Danny Hoyt ever let you in the room?
Eventually, yes, she did let me in the room. Then I was still hoping I'd get my tip even if I was a little bit late.
When you went in the room, who did you see?
Well, Mickey Keenan opened up the door originally. I'd seen him around the casino a few times. We even talked about FIFA once, I guess that's my last name. And then I saw Avery Bancroft, Chase Covington, and Corey Hyde all sitting in the back of the room.
When you saw them, what were they doing?
They were having this serious business-like discussion. When I walked in, I heard Miss Covington say, "I'd like a new one of these if you catch my drift," and she pointed at her own briefcase.
After delivering room service, what did you do?
Well, I set down the cheese plate, popped a bottle of wine, and there's always an awkward pause whenever you deliver room service. So I made a joke. Was kidding around about Miss Covington's dingy-looking briefcase because I figured she definitely needed a new one, but literally no one laughed, so I decided to hightail it out of there.
After you left, what did you do?
I was outside the door, counting my tip, thinking it was a pretty hefty one, and I heard someone yell something about room service, and I figured I might have gotten the order wrong, so I definitely left at that point.
Did anything else happen?
I was about halfway down the hallway, finally heading home, and I heard something, so I turned around and I saw Miss Covington leaving the room I'd just delivered the room service to.
Now, I'd like to talk about the events on April 15th, 2015. Do you remember this day?
Yes, sir, I do.
Did you work on April 15th?
I did. I clocked in at around 4 p.m., I believe, and right when I got there was a package to the front desk, so I took care of that right when I got checked in.
Did you check this package?
I did. I signed for it, and then I opened it.
Can you tell us today why exactly you opened this package?
I wasn't being nosy, I promise. It was just for job security. It was addressed to Mr. Bancroft, and his assistant, Corey Hyde, is really the only one who gets stuff delivered to the casino. I've never seen Mr. Bancroft get anything, so I thought it might be spam mail or junk mail, so I wanted to check it so I wouldn't get in trouble for sending it on up to the office.
What was in this package?
I opened it up, and there was this new black briefcase inside. It was just like the one that Miss Covington had a few days beforehand. Nearly identical, but of course, this one was newer.
You said it was nearly identical. How certain are you?
I'm very certain. I work with luggage literally every day at work. I know what looks the same, what looks identical, what has differences.
Lastly, I'd like to talk about what happened on April 16th, 2015. Do you remember this day?
Yes, sir, I do.
Did you work on April 16th?
I had the early morning afternoon shift, so I worked up until I clocked out at around 2 p.m.
After your shift, did you go home?
Again, not really. I heard that Blue Ivy Birdstein was gambling in the VIP room, and that guy's a legend, and I really want to get an autograph to send back home to my mama. So I decided to stop in the VIP room before I went home.
While you were in the VIP room, did you see anyone else in there?
Just some of the regular gamblers that I see every now and then in the casino, and some of the dealers. Allie Thomas was in there, and then I saw Mr. Bancroft and Miss Covington, but I probably wouldn't have noticed them had it not been for the briefcases that were underneath them.
What was it about these briefcases that you noticed?
Like I said, I probably wouldn't even seen the people with them had I not seen the briefcases. I saw the dingy-looking one underneath Miss Covington, the same one I made a joke about a few days beforehand, and under Mr. Bancroft was the briefcase I delivered to his office just the day beforehand.
After noticing this, where did you go?
Turns out that Blue Ivy wasn't in the VIP room, so I was a little dejected and went and hung out with my friends that were still on the clock at the front desk, and they cheered me up a little bit. That's when I saw Miss Covington leaving the casino with Mr. Bancroft's briefcase, or the one that was underneath Mr. Bancroft's seat in the VIP room, at least.
Would you recognize the picture of this briefcase if I showed it to you today?
Yes, sir, I believe I would.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Thank you.
Your Honor, I'll show an extra copy if you would like. What have I just shown you?
Well, this sure looks a lot like the briefcase that Chase Covington left the casino with on April 16th.
Is this a true and accurate representation of that briefcase?
Yes, sir, I would say so.
Has been changed or altered in any way since you've seen it last?
Not that I can tell.
Your Honor, prosecution moves what was previously labeled as Exhibit 1 into evidence as prosecution's Exhibit A.
Response? Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
So moved.
Now, we've talked a lot about briefcases today. Can you please tell us when exactly you have seen that briefcase before?
Well, this briefcase I've seen 3 times, actually.
When was the first time you saw that briefcase?
The first time I saw this briefcase was on April 15th, whenever I delivered it at Mr. Bancroft's office. I signed for it, opened it, did all that jazz.
When was the second time you saw that briefcase?
Second time was the next day on April 16th. I saw it underneath Mr. Bancroft's seat in the VIP room.
And when was the last time you saw that briefcase?
The very last time was when Miss Covington was walking out of the casino on April 16th, and she was carrying this with her.
Your Honor, I have no further questions. May I retrieve and publish to the jury?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Mr. Del Sesto, you're a bellhop at the Black Bear Casino,
Yes, ma'am. As far as I can tell, I'm still employed there.
and you worked on April 13th.
Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
You delivered room service to room 312.
Yes, ma'am. It was a cheese plate and a bottle of rum and Conti. I was trying to get a big tip since it was one of their nicer bottles of wine.
But you didn't stay in this room for the entire meeting.
I'm sorry, I don't know which meeting you're referring to.
On April 13th, you delivered room service to room 312, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I just don't know what meeting was going on.
Well, there were people in that room.
Yes, ma'am. There was Chase Covington, Avery Bancroft, Mickey Keenan, and Court Haddoll in the room. So I guess they might have been having a meeting with all 4 of them.
But you weren't in there for the entire extent of their conversation.
No, ma'am. I came in there just to deliver my room service. Whenever they called for the order, I went there and delivered it.
On April 15th, you worked a relatively long shift.
Yes, ma'am. The Black Bear has me on a pretty strict schedule, but I worked there for a few years, so I've gotten used to it.
And when your shift ended on the early hours of the 16th, you went home.
Yes, ma'am. Bless you.
And you had a shift later that morning on the 16th.
Yes, ma'am. Like I said earlier, the Black Bear has me on a pretty strict schedule, but I've gotten used to it.
And you slept very little between these 2 shifts.
Objection relevance.
Your Honor, this goes to the credibility of the witness. If I may proffer, this witness will go on to tell us that he was half asleep, stumbling around like a zombie, and his state of sleepiness could affect what he saw or when he believes he saw things, and that's relevant to this case. Response?
How much sleep the witness got has nothing to do with this case at all. This case is purely about bribery between Chase Covington and Avery Bancroft. How much sleep the witness got has nothing to do with this case at all.
Relevance is an extremely low bar, and the liability of a witness is always at issue.
Yes, Your Honor.
You slept very little between your shifts on the 15th and on the 16th.
Oh, yes, ma'am. That night I got an email that the new season of House of Cards came on Netflix, and I'm a big Kevin Spacey fan, so I decided to get caught up. So I decided to make the sacrifice and watch Mr. Spacey and get a little bit of sleep that night, but it was definitely worth it.
You only slept 20 or 30 minutes that morning.
Yes, ma'am. When I commit to a Netflix show, I watch it quite religiously. My mom still is mad at me about it this day. Stay up all hours of the night.
When you went into your shift on April 16th, you were tired.
Yes, ma'am. Just a little bit, but definitely tired.
Half asleep?
Pretty much.
Stumbling around like a zombie?
Objection, improper character evidence.
Response?
Your Honor, this is something that the witness himself put in his own testimony, and I'm just eliciting it so that the court can fully understand how tired Mr. Del Sesto was during his shift on April 16th.
Response?
Saying that the fact that the witness was stumbling around like a zombie can affect the way the jury interprets his version of what happened. You can't unring the bell once the jury has heard this, so it's not at all relevant to today's case.
So, improper character evidence is something used to show that someone acted a certain way once and so acted a certain way again. So are you contending that they're trying to say that he acted like a zombie at that point? That he was that tired and acted like a zombie at another point, and that would affect his testimony?
I'm trying to say that in this instance, it doesn't matter whether he was or it wasn't.
Denied on those grounds? Do you have any other grounds?
No, not this time, Your Honor.
And overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Would you like me to repeat the question, Mr. Del Sesto?
Yes, ma'am, please. I got a little bit lost in that legal jargon.
You were so tired, you were stumbling around like a zombie, in your own words.
Yes, ma'am. That day in particular was pretty busy at the Blackberry. They had me run left and right, forwards, back. They were just running me ragged, so I got a little tired throughout the day.
In fact, you were so tired, you're not even really sure when some of the events of the day happened.
No, ma'am. I really didn't have a chance to look at the clock. Like I said, left, right, back, and forward all day, and I didn't really have time to stop and look. My watch is actually kind of dead right now.
You mentioned seeing Miss Covington leaving the Black Bear Casino on April 16th.
Yes, ma'am. This was right after I left the VIP room. Went there to see if Blue Ivy Mercy was gambling and get his autograph for Mama Bell back home and Miss Del Sesto. And I saw her leave the casino later, and she was carrying briefcases underneath Mr. Bancroft's seat that I saw.
This was after working a full shift,
Yes, ma'am.
and after only having slept 20 or 30 minutes the morning of.
Objection, asked and answered.
Sustained.
Yes, Your Honor.
You only saw Miss Covington leave with this briefcase for a very short amount of time.
Yes, ma'am. I saw her walking out of the casino and out the front doors.
So just to clarify, that's a yes to my question, Mr. Del Sesto.
Yes, ma'am. Like I said, yes, I saw her from a little bit walking out and out the front doors.
And because of how tired you were, you can't really be sure about some of the events of the day.
Yes, ma'am. I'm not sure which events you're referring to, though.
Just the general timeline of the day.
Timeline, no, man. Like I said, they were running me pretty ragged all day and didn't have a chance to check my watch, and first and foremost, it doesn't even work, so I wasn't really sure what time it was.
Thank you, Mr. Del Sesto. No further questions, Your Honor?
Any redirect?
No redirect at this time, Your Honor.
Yes.
Prosecution, have any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. Prosecution calls Tracy Metos to the stand.
Ms. Meadows, you're on the road.
May I proceed? Please introduce yourself.
Namaste, my name is Tracy Menetos.
What do you do for a living, Ms. Menetos?
Well, I'm currently unemployed, so I've been working to align my chakras. I used to own Chuggy's Bar, but ran into a little bit of trouble with that, and now I do housework around my step-sibling's house to earn my keep there.
And who's your step-sibling?
Chase Covington, the Midlands Gambling Commissioner.
Why did you move in with the defendant?
Well, like I said, I used to own a bar and ran into some legal trouble. When all that was said and done, I lost my marriage, my liquor license, my business, and my home. Chase completely changed my life when she invited me to come and live with her.
Around when did you move in with the defendant?
It was fall 2014. I remember because I had just become a yogi, and Chase's gambling commission was getting on a new casino license, which meant Chase was really busy at work.
Why would you say that?
Well, as the chair of the commission, Chase listened to those petitioning for the new license. She just had a lot going on.
Did the defendant ever say anything to you about the other commissioners that were also on the commission?
She did. Chase would tell me about the super negative energy that the two had between each other and how they practically hated each other. Chase knew that they would vote against each other on any issue, which made Chase a swing vote, and whatever she voted for won.
Now, you mentioned voting. Do you know the defendant's position on this specific vote?
Chase did tell me that whoever she voted for would win, and that she could call the new casino owner to get me a job maybe, and when she was telling me this, I could just feel my karmic energy changing. I had been worried about getting a job.
Do you know who was interested in receiving the new casino license?
Shannon Stark and Avery Bancroft.
How do you know Avery Bancroft is interested?
Well, Mr. Bancroft called Chase the day that she announced the new casino license, and Chase invited him over for drinks a couple weeks later. It was right around Thanksgiving.
Does the defendant often have people over for drinks?
No, almost never, which made this meeting a little bit unusual.
Can you recall what they were discussing at this ACMA meeting?
Well, there was a lot of business talk that went completely over my head, part of the reason why my bar didn't work out. And I distinctly remember Mr. Bancroft saying to Chase, I know things like these require people like myself to go above and beyond just putting together a petition. I'm happy to go the extra mile.
What did the defendant do?
Objection, Your Honor. More prejudicial and probative.
Thoughts?
Your Honor, this is certainly more probative than prejudicial because these statements elicit towards the possibility of the bribe occurring, what we are here today for. The statement of, I'm happy to go the extra mile is alluding to a possible bribe.
Your Honor, in order for this statement to have any probative value, the court has to see the statement in some sort of context. For her to just say that Mr. Bancroft came to the house and said, I'm happy to go the extra mile, it gives no context to the statement. We don't know what she's talking about. We don't know if she's talking about literally running a mile, or if she means adding some extra additions to this casino. And since there's no statement for this context, for the statement, it solely goes to prejudice the jury.
Do you put anything more context for the statement?
Well, Your Honor, this was after the defendant made a phone call to the Avery Bancroft in which this meeting was about. The phone call was right after the announcement of the casino license, and that's where this ACMA meeting was scheduled.
Has all of that information come out in this witness's testimony?
Yes, she testified that the defendant did in fact call Avery Bancroft did in fact call the defendant, and that at that point the defendant scheduled a meeting and tapped drinks with Avery Bancroft.
Well, I understand your contention that there wasn't sufficient context, that this isn't sufficient context or foundation. Do you agree that that testimony did come out?
Yes, Your Honor, I do agree that that testimony came out, but I disagree with the fact that there's still any context to give to surround the statement. But yes, Your Honor.
To restate my question, can you recall what both the defendant and Avery Bancroft were discussing at this meeting?
Well, I was in and out of the meeting because I was playing bartender and was making them this really great jasmine tea, but they were talking a lot about business plans for the new casino, and all of that went over my head. But one thing I really remember them saying while I was in there was Mr. Bancroft saying, I know things like this require people like myself to go above and beyond just putting together a petition. I'm happy to go the extra mile.
How did the defendant react?
Chase just smiled and winked, and I tried to ask her about it later after Mr. Bancroft left, and she told me that whoever's competing for the new casino license better have deep pockets.
Do you know what the defendant meant by this?
Not really. Again, I tried to ask Chase, and she told me that it's an expensive business, which I believe, given all the briefcases that Chase came home from work with.
Now, I'd like to talk about these briefcases. Were you ever able to ask the defendant about these briefcases?
I did, and Chase told me.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay to Ms. Minetto's statement asking about the briefcase.
Response?
May opposing counsel specify?
Yes, Your Honor. So this Ms. Minetto's asking Ms. Covington about the briefcase is an out-of-court statement that has no effect on the listener. It's Minetto's own words, so there's no party opponent, and there's no exception for this.
Your Honor, if I may proffer, she is not going to elicit any phrase that she made about the questioning. It's simply an act, her asking him, and the only statement that will come out is a statement by the party opponent.
And I think he's objecting
To Ms. Minetto's
to
statement.
Ms. Minetto's statement. What was the statement there?
Asking about the briefcase.
What is your response to him objecting to hearsay to Ms. Minetto's question?
There's no specific statement being elicited at all. We're simply saying that she did ask a question. There's no specific question or phrasing of that questioning being elicited.
Yeah, Your Honor. Just because the prosecution would like to rephrase or summarize Ms. Minetto's statement does not mean that doesn't mean that there wasn't a statement that came out. Whether you paraphrase it, summarize it, or directly quote it, it's still a statement.
Your Honor, we're not even saying. All we're saying is simply that she did, in fact, ask. There's no context of her asking any specific form of this question. We're only using this to show what Chase Covington had to say about the briefcases.
One last response, Your Honor.
Just 1 second. I don't believe that simply because you're not giving me specific words that she said, that makes it not hearsay. Do you have a response on any other grounds about how this question fits the definition, doesn't fit the definition of hearsay, or if there are any exceptions?
Yes, Your Honor. This is actually not to prove the truth of the matter asserted, but the effect on the listener. If I may proffer, her hearing what he says about the briefcases actually leads her to investigate more on these briefcases. It made her rather suspicious and confused.
So that would be an effect for a subsequent statement by the person who she's asking this question to. That would be an effect to this, an effect that is made by this question. Do you have any argument about this specific question, how it fits the definition of hearsay, or if there are any exceptions?
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
You may.
If I may, Your Honor? This statement isn't making any assertion, or it's not even a statement, it's simply a question. There's no assertion being made at all.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, we were talking about these briefcases. Did you ever ask the defendant about said briefcases?
I did, and Chase told me it was the price of doing business.
Do you know what the defendant meant by this?
No, not exactly.
Did you ever see the contents of any of these briefcases?
Yes, I did. I looked into a couple of them, and one of them that I found was full of money. It was completely stuffed full of cash, and it made me super worried about Chase.
Why were you worried?
Well, given the things I've had to overcome in my past and the bad karma
Objection,
I've
Your
had to
Honor.
overcome.
Relevance to why Ms. Minetto's was worried. With no disrespect to Ms. Minetto's, her feelings are, they don't go to prove any issue at hand here in today's case.
Response?
Her worry, if I may proffer, is what leads her to investigate further into these briefcases and come in contact with more evidence that is very relevant to today's case.
Let's move along to the actual things that happened and the actions and not worry about the incidents that are
Yes, Your Honor.
After seeing the contents of these briefcases, what did you do?
Well, I began to look out for other signs of anything, maybe gambling debt, since I know Chase likes to gamble a lot. And I mentioned before I do her housework. So when doing her laundry, I'd like to go through her pockets to see if I could find any chips or anything. And what I did find was a napkin that said yes equals 150K with a line through it, and 250K.
Objection, Your Honor. Facts not in evidence.
Response?
Your Honor, can opposing counsel specify once again?
Your Honor, they're asking Ms. Minetto about this napkin that she found, and they haven't entered that exhibit into evidence, so therefore the jury doesn't know what they're talking about, and it's facts not in evidence. They have to enter it into evidence before they start talking about the content of this piece of evidence.
Your Honor, this is simply to show what Ms. Minetto's This is simply to show what triggered Ms. Menendez to look for even more information relating to today's case. And if I may proffer, because of this, she goes in search for a bank statement that she finds in the defendant's office.
Do you intend to enter this napkin or a copy of this napkin into evidence at some point?
No, Your Honor.
What further response?
Your Honor, well, I have no doubt that this napkin might have led Ms. Menendez to have a reaction to her, to investigate to Ms. Covington's pockets even more. The fact that this is not in evidence, though, they can't go into that. It's simple, no matter what the reaction is.
Do you have this piece of evidence?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead and enter it before you speak about the contents of it.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, if I were to bring this napkin before you today, would you notice it or be able to identify it?
Oh, absolutely.
No, one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
You guys don't have it, we can pretend.
Yeah, we'll deconstruct it as a napkin.
Constructively have it.
Permission to approach the witness?
You may.
Now, what did I just hand you?
This is a photocopy of the napkin that I found in Chase's pocket.
Would you say it's a fair and accurate representation?
Yes, I would.
And has it been changed or altered in any way?
No, not at all.
Your Honor, prosecution enters which was previously marked as Exhibit 4 as prosecution's B.
Objection?
Yes, Your Honor, that's a hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, under Rule 801D2E, this is a statement by the party opponent and their co-conspirator in furtherance of a conspiracy. Furthermore, Detective Keenan, this corroborates with Detective Keenan's findings in today's case.
Response?
Your Honor, Ms. Menendez does not know who wrote on this napkin. She doesn't know Mr. Bancroft is the one who wrote these statements.
Have we had any testimony earlier in the trial that would give us an indication of who wrote these statements?
Yes, Your Honor. Mickey Keenan testified to this bank statement earlier today.
Who did he testify, or refresh my memory, who did he testify wrote this statement?
Avery Bancroft and Chase Covington, party opponent and their co-conspirator.
Do you agree that Mickey Keenan testified to that fact?
I do agree to that fact, Your Honor, but we can't be sure if Mr. Keenan, Officer Keenan and Ms. Menendez are talking about the same napkin. It could be different napkins for all we know. Yes, Your Honor.
Permission to retrieve and publish the jury. Now, Ms. Menendez, after finding this napkin, did you look to find out more about this or the briefcases?
I did. I was going through some things in Chase's office to see if I could pick up any energy that would make me worry about him more. And what I did pick up was a bank statement.
Would you notice this bank statement if I also brought it before you today?
Yes, I would.
Permission to approach the witness.
You may.
What did I just hand you?
This is the bank statement that I picked up off of Chase's desk.
Would you say it's a fair and accurate representation?
Yes, I would.
And has it been changed or altered in any way?
No.
Your Honor, prosecution enters what is previously marked as Exhibit 11 as prosecution C.
Yes, Your Honor, it's a hearsay again.
Any response?
Yes, under Rule 8036, this is a regularly conducted business activity by a trustworthy business. And there's actually the sheet on the front here is actually signed by the custodian of the bank itself.
Your response?
Oh, Your Honor, it's good seeing that the custodian authorized it, and I withdraw my objection and realize that it is a regularly conducted business activity.
Alright, we appreciate you redacting your objection when it is not suitable.
Now, what about this bank statement when you saw it in the defendant's home office caught your attention?
Well, I noticed two things. First, one of the dates on here is April 17th, which was the day before the New Year's and practically got own input. More importantly, what I saw was a $200,000 cash deposit into one of Chase's accounts.
And what date was this cash deposit on?
April 17th.
No further questions, Your Honor. Permission to retrieve and pose to the jury.
Yes, Your Honor. Morning, Mr. Meadows. My name is Richard Zara, so I'd like to ask you a couple of questions.
Good evening, brother. That's okay.
You recently spoke to your attorney about a napkin that you found with Charlotte Covington.
Yes, my stepsister.
No, but the word bride wasn't written on this napkin.
No, the only thing written on the napkin was yes, and then 150K and 250K.
You don't know who wrote this napkin.
No, I found it in her pocket, so I can only assume maybe wrote it to Chase, but I have no idea who wrote it.
You don't even know what this napkin was referring to.
No, I do not.
No. You spoke about a meeting that you had that was between yourself, Ms. Charlotte Covington, and Mr. Avery Bancroft.
Yes, I wasn't really part of the meeting. Like I said, I was making drinks for the two of them.
But you never go to Mr. Bancroft to any of his jobs.
No, that was really the only time I interacted with Mr. Bancroft.
You never go to any meetings with Mr. Bancroft.
No, again, that was my only interaction with him.
You never go to work with Ms. Covington.
No, I do all their housework while she earns the money.
You never go to any meetings with Ms. Covington.
No, I do not.
So let's focus on this one meeting, right? You start some drinks.
Yes, I have this really great jasmine tea that I was serving them. It's supposed to open the channels of communication.
You said during this meeting they were talking about business.
Yes, they were.
Mr. Bancroft, he never mentioned the word bride.
No, I didn't hear too many of the specifics. Again, I was in and out, but they had a lot of talk about business and their plans for the new casino. Mr. Bancroft was going to go down in history as the first person to have 2 casinos in Midland if he got this.
So, Mr. Bancroft, you're talking about the plans for the casino, right?
Yes, initially that's what they were talking about.
Mr. Covington, again, just talking about the plans for the casino as well.
Yes, that's what they spoke about at the meeting that they had.
You said Mr. Bancroft mentioned that he would like to go the extra mile. Am I correct?
Yes, he said that right after saying he knows that he needs to do a little bit more than just putting together a petition.
Now, you don't know what this extra mile meant, do you?
No, I don't know exactly what he meant by it.
This could have meant adding some more hotel rooms.
I guess it could have meant that. It could have meant a lot of things, really.
This could have meant adding more slot machines,
It could have, yes.
more blackjack tables.
Possibly.
And so another thing you heard was Ms. Covington say, "I would never trade my vote for any favors." Right?
She did say that pretty loudly.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Prosecution have any further witnesses?
No, Your Honor. The prosecution rests. We just ask for a brief 5 to 10 minute recess before the defense starts their